In this video, we are going to talk about the random package or so-called random module in Python programming language. And remember that this package is used for doing random stuff. And also remember that this package is a built-in package. So we can simply import this package as random. So we can import random package, and then you can use the functions available in this package, in this module, let's say. So suppose that we want to generate a number between 1 to 6 like a dice. In order to do so, we simply type random, which is this package, and then we simply type randint. And this randint means random integer number. It means that we are going to generate a random integer number between, for example, 1 to 6. And remember that this value is inclusive. Usually the second value is exclusive in Python, but here's an exception. This value is inclusive. It means that if you store this in a variable, let's say called x, and if you print the x variable, and if I run the code, as you can see, it is possible to generate 6 as well. So this is the meaning of inclusive. It means it is possible to generate 6 as well. And also remember that this is the random process. So it is possible to get different results in different runs. For example, if I run the code again and again and again, you can see that it is possible to get different results. Now suppose that we want to generate 100 numbers between 1 to 6. That would be so easy with the for loop. So we can define a list. Let's call that my list, and then I'm going to use a for loop. So I'm going to use a for loop for I in a range of 100 because you want to repeat the process of generating random numbers 100 times. Then I'm going to simply type random.randint, and I want to generate a random between 1 to 6, and then every time I generate a random number, every time it generates a random number, I'm going to append that to my list. So I simply type my list that append, and I want to append this number. So after doing all this stuff and outside of the for loop, I want to print my list. And if I run a code, you can see we have 100 numbers between 1 to 6. So as you can see, we have generated 100 numbers between 1 to 6. And now suppose that we want to generate a continuous number between 0 to 1. That's very easy. So we can simply type random.random. And for example, suppose that I want to store the result in a variable, let's say called R, which stands for random in my mind, but you can see that the name of the variable is totally arbitrary. And now if I print the R variable and if I run a code, you can see it generates a number like this, but remember that this process is totally random. So if I run the code again and again and again, you can see it is possible to get different results. And also remember that if you want to generate a lot of continuous numbers between 1 to 0, we can do the same thing that we have did in randint. So you can use a for loop to do so. So now suppose that we want to generate a continuous random number between A and B. For example, suppose that we want to generate a continuous random number between 2 and 5. In order to do so, first we simply type random.uniform. We're going to use the uniform distribution, which means we are going to have a continuous random number between A and B. And for example, suppose that we want to pass 2 and 5. So if I store the results in a variable, let's say called R, and if I print the R variable, and if I run the code, you can see every time I run the code, it is possible to get different results. And now suppose that we want to generate a random number from the normal distribution, which its mean is 1000 and its standard deviation is 5. So in order to do so, we simply type random.normalvariate. And as you can see, the first parameter, the first argument that we should pass is mu, which is its mean. So we want to pass 1000. And the sigma, which is the standard deviation, is 5. And if I store the result in a variable, let's say called R, and if I print the R variable, and if I run a code, you can see every time we run the code, it is possible to get different results. And now let's talk about how we can shuffle a list. For example, suppose that we have defined a list called X, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and we want to shuffle this list. And by saying shuffle, I mean we want to randomly order these values, randomly order these values. So if you wait a minute, you will understand what do I mean by shuffle. So let's do that. So I simply type random.shuffle because I want to shuffle the X list. And remember, you shouldn't store the results in a variable, let's say called Y, because if you do that and if you print the Y variable, you will get none. Why? Because this shuffle function is not going to return anything. But if you, for example, don't store the results in any variable, and if you print the X itself, and if you run the code, you can see it has been shuffled. And if you run the code again, you can see it is possible to get different results in different runs. And it is going to shuffle the list. It is going to change the order of the list in random order. So this is the meaning of shuffle. And now suppose that we have a list called X, which contains 10 numbers from 1 all the way up to 10. And for example, suppose that we want to randomly select a number from this list. In order to do so, we simply type random.choice, and we should pass our sequence, which in this example is X, the X variable, which is a list of numbers. After that, we put the results in a variable, let's say called Y. And if I print the Y variable, and if I run the code, you can see it returns 10. It means that it has chosen 10. And if I run the code again and again, you can see it is possible to get different results. So now suppose that we want to choose multiple values randomly. In order to do so, we use another function called choices, because you are going to pick multiple values. And also we should pass another argument, which is k, and it means that how many values do you want to pick. So for example, suppose that I want to pick 2 numbers or 3 numbers, let's say 4 numbers from the X list. So if I run the code, you can see it has picked up 4 numbers from this list, and if I run the code again, you can see it has picked 4 numbers. But as you can see, this is a repetition. It means that it has chosen the values by replacement. And when I say by replacement, it means that it is possible to generate repetitive numbers. But if you want to choose 4 numbers from X without replacement, I mean without any repetition, then you can use another function called sample. So if I run a code, you can see I get 4 numbers without replacement, without repetition. And if I run the code again and again and again, you can see it is possible to get different results. But remember that we are not going to have repetition. Now I really suggest you to watch this video, which is about random seed, which is a very important topic, a very practical topic, which you should absolutely know about.